We see a mysterious stone door illuminated by torches, where inside a fierce battle is taking place. Running, a young man with orange hair gives his all to dodge the monster's attacks. While wondering if that's even possible, we find out that during his life he had already met a dragon, fell off a cliff after being attacked by a squid-like monster, and even had to ride a winged beast, fighting against a creature with red hair and golden armor. The boy being grabbed by the monster, immediately remembering that not long ago he was just an average unemployed 30-year-old, but ended up in that rather unusual situation. All he wants to know is how he reached this point and what that damned fate has in store for him. We return to the past when the boy was in the real world playing on his computer. Suddenly, what seems to be an invitation from someone called Gada arrives. Intrigued, the young man says that someone is having an easy life like his, then concludes that if that were real, it wouldn't be so amazing. Referring to his second round at life, we find out that the protagonist's life can be summed up in 3 lines, where the first started when he ended up in an orphanage, the second when he left the orphanage and started working in a factory, and finally now at 30 he works part-time jobs while studying for a civil service exam, with his only joy being the game on his screen, nicknamed Shimbos, where he's not just a veteran player. Thinking, the protagonist says that everything he owns fits inside his one-room apartment and wonders if things would be different if he had a guide. Suddenly, another invitation from Gada arrives, making the young man excited. Sending a message, he says he agrees to join round 21. However, when the mysterious user asks if he's sure, a little doubt starts creeping into his mind. After typing another message and receiving a cryptic reply, our boy begins to lose interest. But suddenly, a voice comes through his headphones, saying it wants to see if he'll really survive. A strong light starts coming out of the screen and the protagonist simply disappears like magic, waking up in a strange place as if he had been kidnapped. Mysterious people remove a hood from the boy's face, and a man, after approaching, says that he is the third prince of the Magic Empire. We find out that in this life, the protagonist is called Yahello. Not understanding anything, he just watches until one of the guys asks to remove the gag from his mouth. After that, the group's leader kneels down and asks the young man to lift his head, open his eyes wide and look at him. Nervous, Balt wonders which line of life he's in. The man then says that face really suits him. After thinking for a bit, our boy realizes he's at the part of the game where the prince's assassination happens. In a grim tone, the man says it's better if he doesn't try anything, while Balt can only wonder if this is some kind of prank. Turning around, the leader warns that on that day, the young man will be executed in the name of the Republic. Nervously, he says there's been some misunderstanding, but the hooded man places the sword on his neck and says he already told him this was no joke. Strawberry juice starts dripping from where the blade is. The man then says that even if the boy is a degenerate prince, when the Emperor finds out, he won't let it go. Coming to his senses, Galosian finally understands this isn't a prank, and that now he is the third prince of the Balt Empire, known for his laziness and bizarre behavior, being a disposable NPC whose life ends in that event. Intrigued, the protagonist wonders who is controlling him if this time he's the NPC, deciding to catch the attention of one of the hooded men. Approaching again, the group's leader asks if the third prince has any last words. Stammering, the boy says he doesn't know what's going on here, he's not the third prince. The man then tells him to stop lying, stating that his red eyes scream royalty, along with his fat body making it clear he's the third prince. Shocked, Gelosian wonders how come he didn't come as the protagonist and is just a disposable character, then loudly questioning what the hell is going on. Raising his sword, the man says he'll make sure the boy's death is quick and painless, charging at full speed. With his eyes closed, the protagonist says he can't die like this. After all, there are still things he wants to achieve. Suddenly, the world seems to lose its color. Opening his eyes again, our boy wonders why he isn't feeling any pain, and why everyone is frozen. A message appears saying that the game is starting, and that the player controlling Galosian has received a mission called Escape the Crisis. Thinking, the protagonist concludes that since everything has stopped, he'll be able to move to progress in the scenario, something he'll have to do in a short amount of time before everything returns to normal. Another message appears saying that the selection of destiny cards will begin. We find out that these cards grant, among other things, extra stats, unique abilities, and exclusive equipment. That's why choosing the right card requires skill, and the next round will only happen after the player reaches a certain level. Anxious, our boy can only pray for something good to come. Suddenly, lightning starts to appear, giving way to 3 cards. Thinking, the boy says that as soon as he makes the choice, the freezing will end, which could result in his death or in his continuation in the game. Even terrified, he decides it's time to turn the card, revealing that he's also curious despite being in such a situation. Smiling, the protagonist asks for it to be shown right away whether he hit the jackpot or drew misery. We find out that in that world there's a rule about the first shuffle, where the player is guaranteed at least 1 melee combat card, which allows an easy start. And we then see that the average grade of the 3 cards Gelosian drew is B. Analyzing the situation, the protagonist decides to bet everything in exchange for something of grade A. So he turns over the first card, which is the Slave Gladiator, being a grade F card. Surprised, the boy wonders if this is some kind of joke. But when turning over the next card, he ends up drawing the third-class actor of grade D, Breaking out in a cold sweat, he wonders what the hell is going on, then remembering that the average grade of the first draw is B, which means that maybe the next card is grade S. Determined, Gelosian moves to his last chance. A very bright light appears, followed by a colorful explosion that forces the boy to shield his eyes. But when he looks forward again, the protagonist realizes he drew a transcendent card, which features on its cover none other than the Great Mage himself. Mouth agape, he again questions what is happening, since a transcendent level card is almost impossible to draw, especially this early on, usually appearing only after the supreme long-range phase, staring firmly at the card while the sword still rests against his neck. Gelosian wonders if this happened because he's there as an NPC, since his consciousness is trapped in a character that wasn't created by a player, having a fully established story and language. Besides the fact that members of the Balt Imperial family are exceptional mages, even confused, the protagonist concludes it's time to choose which card will save his pretty little neck, the bad news being that it won't be the Great Mage card that does that, even if it's transcendent level, as for now he can only use 3 abilities granted by the card. We find out that the Great Mage card has a skill called Super Spatial Control, which only works against magical weapons. The most important fact being that all magic needs time to draw mana from the core located around the mage's heart. With tears in his eyes, Gelosian thinks that even so, he can't simply waste the chance to choose that card, concluding that maybe instead of losing his head, he'll reincarnate, even if that rarely happens to NPCs. Intrigued, the boy says he doesn't know who dragged him into that world and trapped him in that body, only to then offer a top-level card as if it were all a joke. Caught in his memories, he recalls when a mysterious voice came out of his headphones, then choosing the Grade F card to survive, even though deep down he's furious for throwing a transcendent card in the trash. Looking at the card, the protagonist promises he'll find it again someday, while praying that his choice will stop him from losing his head. A message appears saying that he has gained 3 unique shills from the gladiator, and that the game will resume in 5 seconds. Irritated, he asks who the idiot messing with him is, thinking. Our boy says that even if in the original story his character dies, that won't happen to him trapped in that body. Suddenly the game resumes, but no message appears explaining how to use the earned abilities. The man holding the sword after striking the blow turns his back and walks away. Approaching the others, he says it's time to retreat along the already planned route. However, someone warns him that the third prince is not dead. Shocked, the commander asks how that's possible if he just cut his neck. But the other guy yells that didn't happen. Terrified, Gelosian thanks for instinctively figuring out how to activate the skill, revealing that he chose that trash card because among perverted players, it's somewhat famous, even if the abilities are often useless. Walking up to the boy, the commander asks how his head is still attached to his neck, stating that he doesn't know what he did, but nothing will stop him from leaving there dead. Taking action, the protagonist calls Bamelo trash, leaving everyone a bit surprised. The commander then asks how he knows his name. Standing up, our boy questions, how dare he not recognize who's inhabiting that fat body? Revealing next that he is Ulam, the god of vengeance and the master of the group. Thinking, our boy says he knows that everyone there are priests of the High Church of Ulam, assassins serving in the Order of Vengeance, since the church is part of the Revolutionary Army, and that's why they kidnapped the third prince to overthrow the Empire, which is one of the 3 main factions in the game, so he'll have to use all his acting talent. To stay alive, jumping as if annoyed, the protagonist orders them to release him immediately. In disbelief, Bamilo asks if he's saying that that fat body is the vessel of Lord Olam. Shouting, Gelosian questions how the man dares point a finger at the body he inhabits, all while holding its cheeks. Seeing the looks, our boy wonders if he overdid it, then concludes that no, after all, there are 12 gods in that world who love to descend into the lower realms, including the god of vengeance, who is true to his domain and loves to insert himself into every war or conflict, frequently appearing to his followers, which for him was a stroke of luck. The commander then asks if Olam can grant his worthy followers a bit of divine faith. Furious, the protagonist asks if the man thinks he didn't notice that the golden idol on his altar was just gold-plated. The question catches Bamelo off guard. Continuing his act, Gelosian questions if they all want to die doing something like that, ordering again for someone to untie him immediately. Quickly, 2 hooded men approach, and while untying the knots, they start apologizing. Thinking, the protagonist says his plan only worked because no one expected the third prince to do something like that. Not even Bamelo Demarque, the leader of the Order of Vengeance, who is cold and calculating. Bowing, the man apologizes to the boy. Grabbing his wrists, our boy asks if that's all he has to offer, then orders everyone there to kneel. The coated ones just obey, and on the ground, they ask for forgiveness again while begging for mercy. Up front, the commander states that it's an honor to be face to face with his master, but he would like to know why he descended directly if he could have sent a divine message to the high priest. Reflecting, the protagonist concludes that his lie didn't fully stick, and that there's still a guy in the corner who hasn't kneeled. Approaching the Order's leader, he says that Prince Gelosian will become a chosen apostle, and that therefore no one may touch him. Hearing that makes Bamelo bite the bait to the point of starting to fear losing his own position. Continuing, the protagonist says that the third prince will later join the Revolutionary Army, while thinking that the man will definitely check with the high priest, which means there's someone else behind everything. An inside and outside collaborator, since a prince of the empire would never be left to die. Taking precautions, Gelosian says that the third prince won't return to the palace, but will go to Orax to prepare to become an apostle. Therefore, Bamilo must protect and treat him with the utmost respect. We find out that Orax is the largest city in the west and the capital of the revolutionary army, considered enemy territory for imperial citizens. Besides being a place where knowledge is power, making it a good opportunity for the protagonist to trick the system. Standing up, our boy says it's time to go, while thinking that if he wants to turn that trash character into a god, he'll have to cheat. Sometime later in the forest, we see the members of the Order of Vengeance offering food to the protagonist in a rather uncontrollable way. Embarrassed, Gelosian says he's trying to lose weight and asks the men to get the food out of his face. However, the Kunid guys say they're following Olam's orders, making our boy realize that apparently no one there looks like an assassin. Refusing the food again, he says he needs to restrain himself. But a man with a big smile says the boy can stop losing weight because he's had a perfect body from the start. Suddenly, Bamilo arrives and asks why his subordinates are there instead of standing guard. As if they had forgotten they're in imperial territory, everyone quickly scatters. Sitting down, the leader asks the boy not to think badly of the men who just have too much faith, then extending a bird's leg and taking a bite while saying he was just joking. Throwing away the leftovers, he says the third prince really lost a lot of weight, which is quite surprising since only 3 days have passed. After all, he's never seen anyone as tough as the boy in all of his years with the Order, when Bamilo was about to say something else. Gelosian interrupts him and says he knows that at first Bamilo wondered how they get out of imperial territory. With such a huge prince like that, who could walk much, or even get up on his own given his low endurance? Of only a single digit, which basically made him a walking corpse. We see that it was after this discovery that the protagonist realized he needed to lose weight somehow, since everyone looked at him wondering how they'd manage a safe crossing with someone so slow, which made him hate the idea of being a burden. We return to the past when our boy was banging his head on the ground feeling like trash, leaving everyone a bit surprised. Standing up without help, he says he doesn't need potions and that he's ready to continue, after activating his Masochist skill, which increases the user's mental and physical recovery after taking non-fatal damage. We discover that very low attribute points can be quickly improved through training. That's why instead of being a burden, the protagonist decided to smash his own head as much as needed, even if everyone looked at him like he was crazy while also thinking he was tough. Now with an endurance of 37, Gelosian thinks this is just the beginning. Bamilo then says they should reach the place where the teleport gate is the next day so they can go to Orax. But there's a problem since the plan before was to kill him, not take him alive. Surprising the man, the boy says he knows there's an accomplice inside agreeing. The priest says they should have left a corpse as proof, but since that didn't happen, someone will come after them. And being attacked from both sides if their escape route is discovered would be a huge problem, so they need to hurry. After explaining the situation, Bamilo asks if Gelosian knows who the accomplice is. Without hesitation, our boy says yes, and that it's Viscount Zurich Moss, the Minister of Palace Affairs in the Empire. The man then asks if there's any reason for him to think it's that person. Thinking, the protagonist concludes that the priest is testing him while also curious to know more about him. So to gain the man's trust, he says Zurich is an imperial, but his roots are from the Khan tribe, which recently went to war with the Empire for control of the Northwest and is also close to the Revolutionary Army. That's why, since the man's daughter married someone from a native family from a territory near the border. Even though the Empire and the Revolutionary Army are having a truce, small skirmishes still happen constantly, which means there are two possibilities, where the first is that they are sworn enemies of the army or secretly working with them. But since Zurich married off his own daughter to create a bond with the revolutionaries, it means the target will be the Great Church of Ulam, which shows that the minister's son-in-law is a follower or priest of the god of vengeance. Bamilo is left speechless, and says it's really incredible that Gelosian knows all that. Thinking, our boy says that now the man is looking at him completely differently, but since his character didn't die, the Minister of Palace Affairs will use the strongest card he has, like the nearest defense unit from the Lopman Mountains composed of special knights commanded by Marcus Voigt. After thinking for a bit, Bamilo says that in any case, they'll need to be quick. But the protagonist says they can't go through the gate but must find a new path, which you'll find after thinking a bit more. One of the members approaches and asks if the boy is planning to wait for the bear and the nightingale who are chasing them. They are his bodyguards. Looking at the mysterious figure, Gelosian wonders who that guy is. Annoyed, the man asks if he should force his mouth open to get an answer, grabbing his sword next, stating that his patience isn't very long. Smiling, the protagonist asks who he is. After all, there's no reason to answer questions from a stranger, especially a stranger who dares to threaten him in front of Bamilo. Standing up, our boy says he will say two things. First, that he has no intention of returning to the Imperial Palace since for that he wouldn't have followed the priests. And second, that the man is right to say he's waiting for the bear and the nightingale. But he doesn't mean to explain the reason to someone who doesn't even say his own name. Furious, the mysterious guy says that apparently, the The boy doesn't know his place while Galosian tries to figure out where that floral scent is coming from. Bamilo steps in and tells both of them to stop fighting, then states that the man by his side is Urgel, an unofficial member of the Order but one who supports the cause. Thinking, our boy concludes that the guy is a mercenary who, not being affiliated with any group, can travel freely. But still, he's never heard of an NPC with that name, which means Urgel could also be a real person like him. The mysterious figure then says that now that the boy knows his name, he can answer his question. We find out that Bear and Nightingale are Carl's Cillian, a 6-star knight who follows the prince everywhere, and Turvin Sui, Galosian's magic teacher, a 7-star witch. Out of patience, Urgel tells Bamilov that it's better to just kill the boy now. But the protagonist asks if they know the commander of the Special Knights, named Marquis Elrond Royt, insisting afterward for an answer. The Order's leader then says of course he knows, after all, the man is one of the Empire's 3 great swordsmen. Our boy asks if they think they can beat him in a fight. Since neither answers, he says that if they proceed with the journey, Elrond Royt will kill them all, because he's a monster with 9-star sword mastery at level 90, considered by players as one of the few monsters on the entire continent. Ending his speech, Galosian says that challenging the Marquis isn't a bad idea if they just want to disappear. With wide eyes, Urgel says that if that's true, they're heading towards death, surprising a protagonist who thought the man would argue about how he knows that information. Bamila asks what they should do in that case, since even with the bear and the nightingale, there's no guarantee of victory. Looking at the gray-haired guy, our boy realizes he already knew that, then states that he knows a way to get through the gate and enter Orax successfully. But first he needs them to promise to keep his secret, and swear on their pinky fingers in the name of Eulum. The high priest obeys and says he will keep everything the third prince says a secret until death. The protagonist then says he also needs the man to find an item for him as soon as they're in Orax, a pair of glasses that can only be found there. Then he starts talking about the bear, also nicknamed the Dawn Knight, who after the collapse fled the Empire for the 5 northern kingdoms, becoming the commander of the Sky Knights. Galosian says the man's real name is Carl's Royt, legitimate son of Elrond Royt, something few people know, which doesn't include Carl's. As expected, the protagonist notices that Urgel also knew that, which means being a real person, he must have noticed something about him too. So he needs to find out how much the man knows about the game. Later, we see Carl's looking for our boy, about to fight members of the Order of Vengeance. Furious, the knight asks how they dare kidnap the prince and says it's not too late to release him. In their thoughts, the hooded guys say that now the boy is following them by his own will. We see Galosian running while thinking that the knight arrived faster than he expected, so he needs to get there quickly before a fight starts. Activating her power, Turvin Sui orders the men to say where her disciple is, but when someone says they can explain, the woman orders him to shut up if he doesn't want to turn to ashes. With no way out, the hooded men prepare for battle. But our boy arrives just in time and asks everyone to wait, showing his guardians that he's alive and well. The pair is quite surprised by the scene. Since the protagonist's body looks very different, smiling, he tells Carls that he is the third prince. Furious, the knight asks how the members of the Order dared to torture the boy to the point of making him lose so much weight, because he doesn't know that in fact no one did anything. Approaching, our boy says he wasn't kidnapped. Mouth agape, the duo asks what he's talking about. The protagonist then says that in a way he was kidnapped but stayed because he wanted to. Hearing this makes the witch furious. Screaming, she says she went through hell only to now hear that he wasn't in danger, so she'll kill him along with the others. Thinking, Galosian wonders if the ability to curse so much comes from the fact that the woman is a witch. We discover that Turvin is the pride of the Vault Magic Empire, who, according to rumors, is a witch over 200 years old, who stays young with baths of strawberry juice. But the truth is the woman is only 19. She's the kind of witch who passes on her legacy to her successors, including memories and appearance, to fuel the scary rumors. Smiling, Carls asks the young lady to calm down and listen to what the third prince has to say first. Obeying, Turvin shows she's also weak to handsome men. Crossing his arms, the protagonist announces that he's going to Orax. Shouting, the knight asks what he means by going to enemy territory. Our boy then says that he knows that, but the path he intends to take from now on isn't an extension of his past, and that such a path is the only one that will allow him to live the destiny he's chosen. That's why the man shouldn't try to stop him. Approaching, he also apologizes to Turvin, who must be thinking that he gave up on magic, which isn't true, since one day he will still make the light of the 5 colors shine. In her thoughts, the witch wonders what happened to her disciple, who now can even maintain eye contact, besides quoting a saying that has been passed down for generations since the Tower of 5 Colors where she learned magic, a saying that most modern mages don't even know. Smiling, the woman concludes that the boy pretended the whole time to hate magic when in fact he loved it, and acted like an idiot while inside the palace just to fool everyone, which means that in reality the one who failed as a mentor was her. Galosian says he hopes the two of them will come with him, and without hesitation the witch says she will. Catching the boy by surprise, explaining, she says she was effectively demoted as his mentor. That's why it's her duty to believe that one day her disciple will make her the master of the Tower of 5 Colors. In her thoughts, Turvin says that the only problem now is Carl's, whose sole goal was to take the boy back to the palace, which means that even receiving an order from the master himself, he won't obey. Crying, the knight says he never imagined he'd hear Galosian say such things, and kneeling, he states that he always believed the boy would fight for a great cause, that he'll follow him along with his sword, promising that if anyone gets in their way, they'll be immediately defeated. A message appears saying that Carls and Turvin have joined the party. Elsewhere, we see the knight's father saying that something is very frustrating. Approaching another young man, he asks if there's no result from the search, and the boy says no. Angry, the commander thinks that Galosian really isn't helping at all, then remembering that after much effort, he managed to have his son raised by the Cillian family, where the young man had the bad luck of becoming the third prince's companion, being forced to follow him everywhere, which doesn't help Carl's reputation at all. Elrond starts grinding his teeth while thinking that he needs to get his son out of Galosian's clutches, even if it means killing the boy. Out loud, he asks if there's any chance the knight and the witch found the third prince first. The young man in front of him says he highly doubts that. Smiling, the commander states that apparently the heavens are on their side, then affirming that the mission is to cut off the kidnappers' escape route and eliminate them even if they have a hostage. All the knights say they understand what they must do and set off immediately. Alone, Elrond thinks that with that order, no one will care about Galosian's safety, because they'll be focused on eliminating the kidnappers. We then see Galosian apparently deep in thought again. Suddenly, Carl sneaks up and startles him by asking what he's thinking about and why he's holding a sword. Our boy says he needed the weapon, and sitting down, the knight comments on his master's weight loss. The protagonist says he ended up in that state after riding through the mountains with the order of vengeance, almost dying. Carl simply says that even so, he's alive, leaving Galosian confused. With a sad tone, the knight says that finding him was very difficult and he wouldn't know what to do if everything went wrong. Thinking, the protagonist says that makes sense since in the original story the two were like brothers, and that even though he's not the real prince, he's happy to see his attack leader, who, besides being talented, if raised properly, can do well by the end of the game. But meeting him in real life is like seeing a former classmate he was very close to. Turvan approaches and asks if the protagonist slept well. Still thinking, he remembers how hard it was to befriend the woman. Standing up, the knight asks if the witch slept well, and she says yes. Then she says she'll take a bath first before joining them. Smiling, Carl says that despite being skinny, the protagonist seems full of energy like before, when they were at the boys' palace, referring to the school attended by high-ranking nobles' children. The knight remembers how all the court ladies loved the boy as well as the princess. Intrigued, our boy reveals he didn't know any of that. Carl then says that if magic were considered basic knowledge, for everyone, things could have been different. Thinking, Galosian says that makes sense since he's the prince of a magical empire, who has no talent for magic, which made everyone who had high hopes for him feel disappointed. Snapping out of his daydream, our boy says his ally shouldn't blame himself so much, since no matter what kind of child he was in the past, no one remembers the third prince from the boys' palace anymore. So it would be better if they focused on the present. The knight says he likes that idea. Galosian then says that fortunately, people don't know the original that well, leaving Carl's intrigue. Reflecting, the protagonist says he's more confident than ever about dealing with that world, even if for now he's just a failure, which won't last long since one day he'll get another chance to draw the mage card. Placing his hand on the knight's shoulder, he promises that he'll come back with the right to survive, and when he does, no one will be able to look down on him. Carl says something that doesn't make sense, and the protagonist asks if he's really that dumb. Then both start joking with each other. When Turvan arrives, the protagonist goes back to talking about plans for the future, which don't include going back to the palace where there are traitors. Galosian then asks if the man knows Markbia Elrond Reut. The boy says yes, and that the man is a friend of his father. Becoming shocked upon realizing the man might be a traitor. Dismissing that idea, our boy says that actually the knight is blocking the gate in hopes of taking him back to the palace. The knight then says that one way or another, the Order of Vengeance will be annihilated and they'll be dragged home, even if hearing that disappoints his master. Smiling, the protagonist says he's not disappointed, making Carls realize he has another idea. Curious, the knight and the witch ask what the plan is. Grabbing his sword, Galosian says that his idea is right there, then reveals that he plans to defeat the Marquis and pass through the gate. Staring at each other, the boy's two allies try to figure out if he's serious. Carls then asks if the protagonist is sick, while Turvan says he must be crazy. Then the knight grabs the young man's head to check his temperature. Our boy says he's serious. Annoyed, the knight says there's no way he can defeat the commander. The witch says that for that, he would have needed to show interest in magic before. Thinking, the protagonist says it makes sense that the duo is underestimating him. After the humiliations, the red-haired woman asks how he intends to do that. Smiling, Galosian says he'll request a noble duel with the commander and make him lose his sword. In disbelief, Carl says doing that is impossible. We find out that a noble duel is a distinct one-on-one battle technique where the participants decide the fight's conditions. The knight asks what kind of conditions the boy will add, stating that if it's something dangerous, he won't accept. Galosian then says that first he'll ask the Marquis to fight with a pure sword, then he'll establish that whoever drops their sword first loses, and that no type of shield will be allowed. Standing up, the blonde man says that these rules are less useful for the boy, since even with a pure sword, Royd is still very strong. Besides the fact that the weaker side has a higher chance of dropping the sword, and not using the shield puts him in extreme danger, making the duel a joke. That's why, as a protective knight, he won't allow that to happen. Our boy then asks the man not to worry because he'll be fine, then asks how he would react if challenged by a rookie prince being a swordsman with 59 years of training. After thinking for a moment, Carl says it would be hard to take it seriously and would attack just to make the sword fly. Since injuring a prince makes things complicated, Galosian then says that's why he thought of the 3 conditions. To make sure the Marquis doesn't kill him, even if he really wants to. In his thoughts, our boy reveals that if Carl's is the observer, it also lowers the chance of the man doing something to his son's master. Realizing next that he needs to change the subject quickly to avoid saying too much. The knight asks why he thinks the Marquis hates him, giving a little laugh. The protagonist says that's old stuff. Joining the conversation, Turvin says she hasn't seen anyone from the Order of Vengeance yet. Far away, we see the hooded ones who left to carry out a mission given by Galosian. After tying up goblins, the men discuss which one the boy will like more. Bamulo appears and says they're really idiots, since faith in general requires consistent and genuine belief. Stating the creature the leader is carrying, the others ask the man to let it go. Bamulo asks why he would do that if he had so much trouble capturing the thing, when the priest questions about the people who were captured by the goblins. Answering, the leader says he sent everyone back to the village since it was Olam's will. So now it's time to call the 3rd prince, and quickly the men start volunteering to do it. Irritated, the group leader says that even if the boy may become a disciple, he's still a prince of the enemy army. So everyone must be careful until everything is clarified. Looking at Urgel, he asks if the boy can go call Gelosian. Without questioning, the mysterious young man says he'll do it, while thinking that this is the perfect opportunity to find out more about the boy's plan. We return to see the protagonist saying that since it's almost done, they can start. Confused, Turven asks what he means by that. Smiling, our boy says he asked the priests to clear the goblin barracks, and they must be almost finished. While wondering if this is what they call being carried, then the protagonist reveals that he'll be the one to deliver the final blow. We are taken to the barracks where skilled goblins live, being an area not recommended for beginners. Walking, Gelosian explains that another advantage they have is the fact that they know the Marquis's weakness. Carl says he's aware of the information that the man's mana and sword aren't compatible. Turvin then says she also heard that the Marquis doesn't use mana very efficiently. Suddenly, the protagonist reveals that the swordsman's current weakness is in his right shoulder, which was severely paralyzed, but that the cause of the accident is unknown. The witch asks if the boy is sure about that, and he says yes, while thinking that he can't reveal how he has that kind of information. Scratching his cheek, he says he overheard it in a conversation between the king and the captain of the Imperial Knights. Smiling, Carl says that if that's the case, the man won't be able to use any vanguard techniques, which is an aggressive jewel blade style focusing on relentless attack, due to the 20% increase in damage when using the Roit family's special sword, therefore being a high-level technique responsible for taking Elrond to the realm of the 9th star. Happy, the witch says they really might have a chance. But Carl gets worried, stating that the man is still capable of defeating a 7-star opponent with just one arm, which means the boy will still end up losing badly. Thinking, Gelosian wonders if the knight is really on his side, then stating that he makes a good point, but that he knows which sword techniques Elrond will use. With only one arm, jaws dropping, the duo asks how the protagonist knows that. Giving a little laugh, our boy asks if they don't think there's a chance of winning if the man drops the sword. But before revealing the plan, Urgel appears and says that it still won't be enough to make the knight drop his sword. Nervous, the protagonist wonders how long the guy has been there. Approaching, the mysterious young man says he doubts the boy has the strength to withstand even a single blow from the Marquis. Gelosian then says that's why he's after the strength elixir, which temporarily increases the strength of whoever drinks it. Thinking, Urgel concludes that the boy wants to defeat the king of the mountains, Luckman. Interrupting his daydream, the protagonist says he also knows they're not strong enough for that, so he's waiting for helpers to appear. Sometime later, we see a goblin asking our boy not to come closer. With his sword in hand, he thinks that unlike the game, the monster is a living creature, one he doesn't want to kill. But to survive, he'll have to do whatever it takes. After eliminating the goblin, the boy begins to feel a sense of satisfaction flowing through his body, realizing next that he now has 3 skill points, needing now to leave level 1 and reach level 9 to acquire the sword techniques necessary to defeat the Marquis, which means he has a long way to go. After some more time of slaughter, Gelosian acquires the extreme training skill. Carl approaches and asks why he looks different, and beside him, Turvin questions if the boy has been secretly taking potions. Our boy then says that the Order of Vengeance prepared some good things for him. Noticing that the woman was interested, he says he's already taken care of everything, leaving her furious with such greed. Smiling, the protagonist can only think about how she's still just 19 years old. Bamilo appears and asks what else they should do for him. After reflecting for a moment, Yahello says there should still be some goblins around, so the group should bring them there. Then concluding that it's time to learn how to hunt and use a sword. A short time later, we see him with Carls watching the monsters coming their way. Activating her power, Turvin says she'll take care of 2 goblins. Suddenly, a creature appears in the air ready to take out the protagonist, who manages to block the attack with his sword. While wondering how something so small can be so strong, we see that the height difference between the boy and the monster is quite large. Still thinking, Yahello says that using a sword doesn't feel so embarrassing, and thanks to his skills, he can also see where to attack at the right moment, just like in the game. Striking the goblin with all his strength, he feels the adrenaline rush and gets excited to see that he's doing much better than he expected in that battle, since he didn't expect to have such precision and control against such an agile enemy, intending to increase his mental and physical regeneration. Carls approaches and says that's enough fighting for the day, because both he and the Order of Vengeance are exhausted and pushing for more battles could compromise the group's safety and performance. With a little laugh, the protagonist says the knight is right, so it's better if they stop and go out for a drink. Hearing this makes the priests very happy. After returning, everyone gathers around a campfire listening to the stories of one of the hooded men, but they don't realize they're being watched by people hiding behind the trees, thinking a boy wonders if that's really the 3rd prince. On the other side, another man asks the captain if they should kill them all. Turning, the boy says he's thinking. Nervous, the young man wonders why the group didn't hide their tracks and now even lit a campfire while drinking. Then concludes that it could all be a trap, especially since the 3rd prince doesn't seem to be kidnapped, as his bodyguards are also present. Agonized, another guard asks what he's trying to do. The boy then orders him to stay still because he needs to figure out what's going on first. Suddenly, the group that was drinking notices the presence of the knights. Approaching, Fellet says he's happy to see that Yahello is well. Our boy stares at him and simply welcomes him. Annoyed, the man demands an explanation from Carls since he seems to have betrayed the Empire along with the prince and the witch. Thinking, the protagonist says that claiming that would be disrespectful even for someone from the imperial family. The knight simply says that his master will answer the questions after being greeted properly. Turvan appears and says she completely agrees. Seeing this scene makes our boy happy to have trustworthy people by his side. But that doesn't please Fellet at all. Kneeling, the man introduces himself as vice captain and squad leader of the Special Forces Knights. Yahello asks him to stand and for the duo to leave so they can talk alone. After that, our boy says the man must have noticed they've been walking around without covering their tracks. Then revealing that he's doing this to distract the unit chasing them, Fellet asks why the priests are doing that, and the protagonist says it was an order from him since he was waiting for the man. Catching the captain by surprise, he reveals that he wasn't kidnapped, and that he's planning to go to Orax. But for that, he needs to meet Marquis Elron Roit. Thinking, Fellet says that even though the boy is a troublemaker, there's a limit one shouldn't cross. Narrowing his eyes, he asks straight out if the protagonist is saying he'll betray the Empire. Our boy then says that's something the man should discuss with the Marquis. With no way out, Fellet says the boy is right, showing that it won't be so hard for Yahello to bring him to his side. Approaching, the protagonist says that since it's late, it's better they leave for the next day, because he needs to stop somewhere first to get rid of an insect that's been bothering the citizens of the Empire. Then he hopes the man doesn't take the opportunity to attack the Order of Vengeance. After all, as someone who served Commander Roit for a long time, he must also know the secret behind Carl's birth. Shocked, Fellet asks how the boy knows that. But our boy covers his mouth with a finger and says they shouldn't cause trouble. It's better to wait for the night to pass. Walking away, Yahello ends the conversation by asking the captain to meet him the next morning. Jaw-dropping, the man wonders if that's really the 3rd prince, or if the boy has completely lost his mind. Day quickly breaks, and we see the remnants of the campfire. Ready to depart, the protagonist thinks that the technique Elron will use is the Trafalgar sword technique, which focuses on quick attacks with an emphasis on defense, usable regardless of the user's weapon type. We discover that for Elron, his sword represents his ego and thus has a will of its own. After some training time, our boy learns the nomadic quick sword technique, which allows him to strike extremely fast. Testing his new skill, the protagonist says it's really amazing, even if at first glance it seems inferior to the Marquis's technique, since dominant style techniques use the user's weight and power, while quick style techniques use fast movements and flow style techniques exploit the enemy's weaknesses through attacks, being similar to the famous rock, paper, scissors. However, the secret is that quick style techniques are very effective against soft style techniques. Just like the Luxem Kingdom, a state coding the Empire strictly follows a dominant style technique and treated the nomads like slaves but was almost defeated by nomads who increased their own power, and even though the group was eventually defeated, it left behind the nomadic quick sword technique created solely to resist the Trafalgar sword technique. Hearing Carl's call, Yahello says he'll go right away, satisfied with the technique he just learned. Next, we see everyone gathered, Even knowing the groups didn't get along, the protagonist says it's better they focus on causing less damage over time. Irritated, Bamilo says he understands, as does Fellet. Thinking, our boy realizes that actually no one hurt anything, which means leaving the raid for Urgel to coordinate may not be a good idea. Looking to the side, the mysterious boy says it's better for the protagonist to come along. Galosian then asks Carls to hit him hard enough so that everyone pays attention to him. Even hesitant, the knight slaps the protagonist's face, making the groups immediately turn to look. With the attention on him, our boy says he'll command the attack and that everyone there should keep that in mind. That's why as soon as they enter, they must stop fighting and follow the orders, if they want to get out of there alive, since the king of the Lukman Mountains is very dangerous. Worried, Fellet remembers when the boy said it would be an easy mission. Ending the explanations, Galosian says it's time to go in. Inside the great cave, we see the Mountain King lying on a pile of bones. But suddenly something catches his attention. Standing up, he says he definitely smelled something delicious upon seeing the group of warriors standing before him. Thinking, Fellet wonders how many humans the creature has already eaten given the number of bones, and realizes that the nearby monsters are the ones bringing it food, which means he failed to notice how bad the situation was. Out loud, the captain announces that the Knights of the Special Forces will take full responsibility for everything, and now it will avenge all the citizens of the Empire who ended up dying, even if it costs their lives. Shouting, all the knights say they completely understand. However, Bamilo says that revenge is their job, so they will fight as well. Both groups charge forward without hesitation, forcing the creature to strike its first blow, which almost hits the captain of the knights. But Fellet is faster and manages to jump in the air, hitting the monster's eye. In his thoughts, he says that just as Galosian mentioned, the creature's eyes are immune to attacks, even if they seem like a weak point. Shouting, the man orders his subordinates to focus on cutting through the monster's tough skin. We see that both the knights and the priests start working on that plan, cutting and slicing non-stop with their swords. A little farther away, Carl says is what he expected from the Special Forces knights. Our boy agrees and says that although they're knights, the men specialize in ambushes and assassinations. While wondering where Urgel is looking at the witch, he asks her to prepare the spell. We return to the battle, now even more intense, where the King of the Mountains, furious, says that all of them are nothing but damn flies, outraged that they're facing him as if they're worthy. Shouting, the protagonist tells everyone to fall back, because the monster is about to unleash a massive blow, gathering enough strength to devastate everything around in a single attack. An explosion occurs, sending rocks and bones flying everywhere as the energy of the impact reverberates across the battlefield. It's at this moment that Turvan announces she's ready, eyes fixed on the enemy and the spell prepared, then casting a massive fireball that hits the creature directly. Even engulfed in flames, the King of the Mountains resists and continues roaring with uncontrollable fury. Suddenly, the fire disappears without a trace, and something strange happens to the witch, whose body suddenly seems to freeze completely. Without thinking twice, Bamilo jumps with agility and lands a powerful strike on the creature's head. The monster, surprised, gets distracted and sharply turns its face to the opposite side, because several knights had already climbed onto its shoulders, fiercely cutting through its armor. In a coordinated joint attack, thinking, Galosian says everyone is doing very well, since in the second phase, Gromhart's resistance increases, and sword attacks become meaningless because he recovers too quickly. Going back to the past, the protagonist remembers the conversation he had with Bamilo about this, where he said that using mana with the sword would be more effective, but still not enough. Magical attacks would be needed to reduce the creature's resistance, which would focus on attacking Turvan. That's why instead of using Sword Spirit, it would be better to use mana to move faster. After the explanation, our boy says everything is very simple, as if that complicated plan were just another natural step for him. We're taken back to the battle where the tension is palpable, and every move could decide who lives or dies. A priest watches everything from afar, carefully analyzing the chaos around him before making any decision, then giving a smile before charging forward as if he had finally found the perfect moment to act, entering the fight with determination. After a few minutes, Galosian tries everything he can to come up with a strategy to prevent his allies from being wiped out. Suddenly, a hand grabs his shoulder. In front of him, Carls asks the boy not to worry because he will be his sword and shield, besides the fact that the two fighting groups are the elite of the elite, which means they've already been through situations like this many times. Worried, the knight says the protagonist is trying to carry too much on his own, instead of sharing part of the burden with him. Staring at the man, our boy thinks that saying that kind of thing is the same as waving a death flag. Then we see one of the knights, apparently exhausted, and beside him, Fellet asks if the boy is okay, quickly understanding the message just by looking into his eyes. Lifting the knight off the ground, the man says they just need to hold on a little longer. But in his thoughts, he states that the strategy of distracting the monster so the witch can hit it with magic is becoming difficult to execute because they're short on people. Besides the fact that the remaining warriors are getting tired, which means he needs to warm up more to do his job. After grabbing his sword, Fellet charges at the King of the Mountains, determined to land a precise blow while the monster is distracted. However, the creature quickly senses that something is coming. To dodge the attack, the captain does flips in the air using all his agility and experience to barely escape the strike. Realizing next that Turvin is about to cast another spell. Shouting, he tells her to act now because this is the only moment when the enemy is vulnerable. Flames are launched again toward the monster, who screams non-stop, consumed by pain as the fire burns part of its body. Watching the scene, the captain realizes that maybe everything will work out, with a glimmer of hope appearing amidst the destruction. But suddenly his eyes widen, because the monster, even in flames, is charging straight at him and not at the witch. Noticing that it's too late to escape, he concludes that he'll have to block the blow. Placing his sword in front of his body, Fellet tries at all costs to stop Gromhart's axe, but his plan ends up failing. Seeing that he's about to take a fatal hit, he can only think that this is his end, then stating that it was an honor to be Elrond for so long, but at the last second, someone saves him. It's Bamilov, who jokingly says the man doesn't need to thank him, since the monster focused on him for being too showy. The man then says it's better they fight together to fill the gap left by the injured. Without hesitation, Fellet says he agrees and both charge at the enemy, combining their movements with almost instinctive precision. The creature widens the eye located on its forehead, surprised by the speed with which the two attack together, realizing next that a fireball is coming straight at its face. Smiling, Galosian celebrates the fact that the attack worked, feeling that for the first time the group has a real chance of victory. And we see that the union of Bamilo and Fellet, which seemed very unlikely, now proves to be one of the most powerful combinations on the field. Turvin turns and asks him to keep watching and learning how to use magic. Observing the creature, our boy says that somehow they managed to reach the third phase, much more united after everything that's already happened, which means that now all that's left is for everyone to refocus on the strategy. We discover that in Phase 3, Gromhart loses his physical and magical resistance, but his damage increases as his health drops. That's why to defeat him, it's necessary to attack with everything and forget about defense, even though at first the monster focuses on attacking the weakest group, which in this case is Galosian for having the lowest level. A message appears saying that Gromhart's demonic eyes are watching him. Screaming with all his strength, our boy orders everyone to prepare for the worst that's coming. Furious and with flaming eyes, the creature roars, asking how they dare provoke him like that. Grinding his teeth, the beast says it will make sure to bite each one of them. Suddenly, a deafening crash echoes across the battlefield, making the ground shake violently. Surprised and in shock, the protagonist wonders how something like that could happen so suddenly. Not understanding what happened, he asks himself what the hell made Gromhart simply collapse like that. Everyone, in absolute silence, turns their eyes to the fallen monster, trying to understand what happened. And they realize that the one who defeated the King of the Mountains was none other than Urgel. Seeing the boy makes the members of the Order of Vengeance happy, since it was one of them who defeated the monster. Bamilo looks at Fellet and praises him for the good work, and the man does the same. With wide eyes, Gelosian wonders if there's something he doesn't know about this game, since originally it wasn't possible to see the ceiling in that raid. After the end of the battle, everyone goes to Gromhart's treasure room, but Fellet is surprised not to find anything there. Smiling, our boy asks if the man really isn't seeing anything. The captain then asks if the boy is talking about the barrels of alcohol while thinking about the rumors that the prince was an alcoholic were true, showing that it's not that at all. The protagonist tells everyone they can leave. Since Gromhart died suddenly, one of the people who was hiding says they know Bamilo, and everyone is happy thinking they were saved by the god Olam. The man then says he's just a servant of the entity, but that he indeed came to save them, following the orders of the god of vengeance. Taking the lead, Fellet introduces the Special Forces Knights and says he also came to save them. But apparently he doesn't make a good impression. An older man says he told his son the Empire would come to rescue them, but now he wants to know why they only arrived when his son is already dead. Shouting, the man says there's no reason for the Knights to be so proud if they arrived so late, to the point where he had to witness his precious child being devoured by the monster. Hearing all that devastates the captain of the Knights. Crying, the man asks what he should say to his dead son, causing a wave of fury among all the survivors, who start shouting and cursing at the group. Another knight asks Fellet if it wouldn't be better to retreat for now, but looking at the man's face, he realizes that he's not well at all. Deeply shaken, the captain starts apologizing. Taking the lead, Gelosian says that since it's not common for mountain monsters to attack nearby villages, the Special Forces Knights took too long to notice, but now he, along with the others, is willing to speak with Elrond so that the creatures will be eliminated, and even though nothing, he says, can ease their sorrow. He would like to apologize for the horror they had to endure in the name of the Empire. A man then asks who the boy is. Bowing, the protagonist introduces himself as Gelosian, the third prince of the Empire. Everyone starts commenting about the rumors that the third prince is a troublemaker. But that gesture shows that the Empire cares about them and that the only enemy was the monster. A blonde guy places a hand on the shoulder of the man who lost his son and says he also lost his wife there. But now they, the survivors, need to move forward and collect stories to tell their deceased loved ones. When the time comes, in his thoughts, our boy says that there's not much to gain from defeating Gromhard, since a monster that attacks humans doesn't hold anything valuable. That's why that raid serves as preparation for the next event, besides providing the strength elixir, which is inside the monster's eye and was his main goal. Suddenly, a prisoner approaches and asks the boy to lift his head, then says he can feel that he's human and would like to ask a favor. That involves his deceased son named Holt. Completely saddened, the man says he knows it's a commoner's name, but would like to ask the prince to remember him, and falls into tears again while begging. Holding the hands of that poor father, Gelosian says he will never forget that name. We're taken to where Elrond is. A bit surprised, he asks if his knight is saying that the third prince seems different, and that's why he left him with the rebels, free. There's not much to say, Fellet just confirms, then stating that the survivors found in the cave want the boy to take the throne. Furious, the troop leader says he's heard enough nonsense for one day, and turning, orders the vice captain to focus on taking care of the survivors because he needs to see everyone with his own eyes. Inside a tent, we see Gelosian arguing with Carls, who apparently had another goal when agreeing to stay with him in the forest. Stammering, the knight says that even though he's the protagonist's bodyguard, he was useless. Mocking, our boy tells him to hold the mug in his hand since it's really heavy. Elrond appears and apologizes for the delay, then says he's heard incredible things from the vice captain, but seeing the expression on his son's face, he asks if something's wrong, worried about the sudden tense atmosphere. The knight says everything's fine, and the man gives a slight smile, though he remains suspicious of his son's restrained response. Sitting down, he asks if it's true that Gelosian is going to Orax. The protagonist confirms and says he knows what he's worried about, but that he needs to go to the city to follow his destiny. So if the man dares to stop him in any way, he'll be forced to do something not very pleasant. Thinking, the swordsman wonders if the boy has completely lost his mind, then says that even as a joke, all this is too much for him to handle. After all, as one of the 3 knights with 9-star status, he doesn't really know how the young man could do anything against him. And even so, they won't let him go to Orax, but will send him back to the palace and kill the rebels hiding in the forest. Standing up, Gelosian plays his card and formally requests a duel against Elrond, asking him to follow him immediately outside. Realizing the man didn't move, the protagonist asks if he's scared because of the shoulder. Furious, the knight says he doesn't know how the boy knows about his injury. But if the goal was to provoke him, it worked because now he accepts the challenge. Outside, Elrond asks the protagonist what the rules of the duel will be. In his thoughts, our boy says the man's voice shows no anticipation of defeat. Looking into the knight's soul, he says the first rule is to use the pure sword, the second is that no armor is allowed, and the third rule is that whoever drops their sword loses, with a message appearing saying that the noble duel will begin. A little further away, the other knights ask if the third prince is crazy to want to do that. Mocking, one of the guys says the boy is just a spoiled brat who's never taken a punch before. Fellet hears everything but prefers to remain silent. Ready to duel, Elrond says it's really impressive that Gelosian chose rules that don't favor him, and that even though the vice captain said he's changed, believing that kind of thing isn't really his style. Then asking if the protagonist knows that the reason he's being judged so harshly now is because of his horrible actions in the past. Without waiting for an answer, the man says that changing himself will be easier than changing the perception of the citizens. Cleaning his ear, our boy asks if it's a habit of his to talk that much. Hearing this makes the knight widen his eyes. Provoking, Gelosian asks if he became a swordsman using his mouth to annoy people with sermons. Boldly, our boy says he's here to defeat the man and go to Orax to build a growth base, while thinking that he knows very well that changing everyone's perception won't be easy at all. But it might be possible if he leaves there victorious, since everyone will think the third prince was pretending to be an idiot. Looking at the Marquis, the protagonist says it's time for him to find out if he's worthy or not. Surprised, Elrond says he never imagined he'd hear the boy say those words. And thinking about Gelosian saying he'll take his son to enemy territory to get drunk starts to get furious, to the point of shutting his mouth and drawing his sword, determined not to let the protagonist leave there alive. Our boy then wonders if he went too far given the terrifying way the man is coming at him, concluding next that now he needs to focus on the fight. Blocking the first blow, he realizes it was by a hair's breadth, even though the knight seems slower. Activating his skill, Gelosian starts to see Elrond's weak points, but he's too busy defending himself to manage to attack. Watching the intense exchange of blows, the knights start cheering for the Marquis' performance while also saying the third prince is doing better than expected. Smiling, Elrond asks why the boy was bragging so much if he's this weak. Nervous, our boy says he needs to hit the weak points, but the man's attacks are too fast, and they don't stop for even a second, which also prevents him from activating his nomad sword skill. Curious, the Marquis asks what the prince is thinking, and if he doesn't realize who's right in front of him at that moment, landing a kick on the protagonist and throwing him far away. The knight shows he's stronger than he thought, surpassing expectations with fast and brutal strikes. In a lot of pain, our boy can only think that he needs to get up even with his body trembling and senses confused, because his opponent is already close enough to attack again, and any more time on the ground could be fatal. With veins bulging on his forehead, Elrond stares at the protagonist with a look of disdain, but instead of taking advantage of the chance and attacking, he just turns and walks away. Carl approaches and asks if Galosian is okay, while he wonders why the man didn't finish the fight. Intrigued, he asks his guardian why the Marquis left. The boy then says that for the fight to end, the protagonist would need to drop the sword. But since that didn't happen, a Knight of Honor would never attack a fallen opponent during a duel, then asking if he can continue. Determined, our boy says he can. Hearing this doesn't please the knight, who shows extreme concern. But unable to do anything, he says he'll believe in his master and obey his will. However, when Galosian was about to return to the fight, the knight grabs his shoulder. Stating that he needs to say something very seriously, the boy says he knows that Trafalgar's technique isn't faster than the protagonist's technique, but if Elrond manages to connect the flows, he could overwhelm him. That's why he must focus on breaking the flow before it's too late. And of course, I'm not getting hurt. Turning, our boy thanks him for the advice and says he'll win and come back safe and sound. Thinking, he says the knight was right, and that it's time to focus on attacking instead of being afraid. Afraid of the disconnect between the game and reality that only makes him hesitate. In the middle of the crowd, we see a child, watching the adults around him. Shouting, the little one asks the third prince to hold on and not lose, making the other survivors also start cheering frantically for Galosian, who's now face to face with Elrond again. Embarrassed, the protagonist says he wishes the spectators wouldn't say those things, while thinking that he needs to understand the world he's in now even better. Even though he already understands it better than any other player, the knight then asks if he's ready. Smiling, our boy says he's been ready from the start, he just got a little nervous, after a few minutes of complete silence. Elrond says that in a way, the boy still has reasons to brag. Mocking, Galosian says that apparently the man is angry, which is understandable. Thinking, he says that the secret of the Nomad sword lies in the fact that it starts evolving when it meets the Trafalgar sword, this being the perfect condition to attack the 3 life points at once, like stacking 3 piles, meaning that everything until now was just a warm-up for what's coming next. Placing the blade of the sword in front of his face, the protagonist says that this time he will start. In his thoughts, the Marquis states that he's never seen a look like that in all the other times he met the third prince, then affirms that the boy can do whatever he wants. Without hesitation, our boy charges forward with everything he has, thus delivering his first strike. However, Elrond manages to dodge as if by magic, even feeling that the boy seems better than before. Placing the sword behind his back, the man blocks another strike, concluding that regardless of the improvement, Galosian is still not good enough to defeat him. Even scared, our boy realizes it's much better to attack than just stay on the defensive. And pushing forward, he starts flying toward his opponent, aiming at one of his weak points, located in the forearm area. With a very quick strike, he manages to hit the target, feeling satisfied for completing the first part of the plan. Thinking, Elrond says that a sword strike from the third prince shouldn't have hit him, so it would be necessary to check one little thing. Lowering himself, the man prepares to attack. With wide eyes, Galosian wonders how the knight got close so fast, then decides to aim for the next weak point instead of getting scared. After landing another hit, he concludes that now only one is left, but the position he's in makes the attack difficult. Suddenly, strawberry juice splashes across the Marquis's face, coming from the protagonist, who used his own arm to brace the sword and block the attack. Shocked, Elrond wonders how the boy did that, even risking cutting off his own arm, and without losing the smile on his face. The world freezes again at the most crucial moment of the battle. Suddenly, a voice says that in the end, he managed to beat someone who's obsessed with swords. With wide eyes, the protagonist wonders how come he just received a rare skill, then being forced to choose a transplant flower that allows him to redirect the opponent's form back. Since relying only on the skill to beat Elrond is complicated. Thinking, Galosian wonders what would happen if he redirected the explosive force of the domain, then concludes that this won't work because the force domain is fading and the knight doesn't take him seriously enough to use brute force, so he'll need to make the man change his mind first. The duel quickly resumes since the protagonist, after much thought, chose to use the cutting technique with the Wowu sword method number 1. Another exchange of blows happens, and everyone starts noticing that the boy's sword is much faster, even though he's using only one hand. Shocked, one of the knights starts to think that Elrond isn't as strong as he seemed, but his comrade grabs his clothes and says that's absurd since the commander hasn't even adjusted his stance yet. Nervous, the yellow-eyed boy asks the knight to calm down. While fighting, the Marquis says it's very interesting that Galosian knows about his shoulder and has learned the oriental sword technique that counters Trafalgar, which means Philip was right, then stating that even if he was reborn, he won't take Carl's to Orax. Thinking, our boy concludes there isn't enough time to make the Marquis take the fight seriously, leaving him no choice but to play dirty. Stepping back, he asks why Elrond is so worried about Carl's leaving, if he considers him a brother and more important than the man who only fathered him. Giving an ultimatum, Galosian asks why the man thinks he has the right to act as the boy's father. Observing, the protagonist thinks that's not quite the reaction he expected since Elrond is considered a model knight, but attacks anyone who strikes his weak point. At this time, he did nothing. Lowering his head, the knight asks what the hell the boy knows to speak to him like that, and stating that just because his son is watching, will try to keep the boy's throat intact. but otherwise, it would be a shame he doesn't make it to Orax to live his destiny. Screaming, the protagonist says that even if he's a marquis, he's still threatening to kill a prince, while wondering in his mind if this time he went too far. The man then asks if the boy thinks anyone cares about him even after being kidnapped, admitting next that he finds the boy's sword technique interesting, with the only problem being that quick swords mean nothing to him, because there's a huge gap in experience between the two, which means the third prince's life will end there. But suddenly, the marquis's sword goes flying, making everyone wonder why the man threw the sword away. Approaching, Carl says that the winner is Galosian Elodibalt, the third prince, leaving some happy and others not so much. Smiling, Turvin says her apprentice did a fantastic job. Intrigued, Elrond wonders what move that was, and why the boy moved as if he knew what his next action would be, without losing the smile on his face as if everything had been meticulously calculated. Our boy extends his hand and asks if he really won, but the knight remains silent and motionless. Rolling his eyes, the protagonist says he should acknowledge his victory and accept that everything said was just provocation. Giving a little laugh, the commander realizes that Fellet was right about Galosian's change, which means Carl's will have a good future. Catching the protagonist by surprise, he kneels and acknowledges defeat. Outraged, the knights say the duel needs to be redone because something is definitely wrong there. The others agree, stating that a duel where magic use is forbidden should be annulled. Standing up and picking up his sword, Elrond tells everyone that he agreed to the conditions from the start, then asking who there wants to become a knight and serve a captain who can't accept a mere result with honor. The knights back down, making Fellet happy. Thinking, the protagonist says that despite everything, he was scared since without the conditions, the man would break his sword with his bare hands, then concluding that having experience is really good, which is what he gained. After dying several times to Elrond in the game, Turvin hugs our boy tightly and says she expected nothing less from him, while Carls gets worried about his injuries. Extremely happy, the woman says she's one step closer to becoming the master of the magic tower. Suddenly, the Marquis approaches and asks to speak with the protagonist alone, while trying to keep a friendly expression on his face. In the middle of the forest, the man reveals that he asked his aides to bring the members of the Order of Vengeance safely. But first of all, as the knight captain of that country, he needs to know what the boy plans to do in Orax, since when he was younger, he carried out a secret mission in the city and saw with his own eyes how dangerous it is. Galosian then says he knows Orax well, which is a city opposite to Kirshen, being chaotic and similar to a labyrinth infested with thieves, and places where dangerous products are sold, where it's even possible to trade life and death in the black market. But it's still a place where people reside. Elrond agrees but says those people aren't princes. Impatient, our boy says he knows the place has 6 armed factions, including 2 churches. Nervous, the knight says he doesn't need to say anything else to avoid mentioning the leader of the revolutionary army, whose name is forbidden to be spoken as it's considered treason against the empire. Galosian asks the man not to worry because he prepared everything in advance and has no intention of joining the army, but rather seizing an opportunity that only Orax offers, big enough for a prince with nothing to bring everything down. Elrond asks if the boy is referring to the dragon hare's nest. Our boy says yes, and that he intends to tame the beast that lives in the Blue Mountains, more specifically in the Dead Dragon's Den, a place where dragons lay their eggs, being an entrance forbidden to any other race, but if someone manages to complete the mission there, they can literally control the dragons. The knight seems quite surprised by these revelations, then asks the protagonist to think carefully since the chance of doing something like that is very small. Our boy says the man is right, but defeating him was also considered impossible by everyone. That's why he needs to follow his destiny. Elrond then asks what he should tell the king after his son goes to Orax. Worried, Galosian realizes he hadn't thought about his psychopathic father, the king of the Varishan Empire, Carlo di Balt, known as one of the strongest and craziest people in humanity. After thinking for a bit, the protagonist says the knight should tell his father that you became a prophet. The man then asks if the boy is talking about the prophet's syndrome, but he says he won't go into details, asking the knight also to say that he went to steal a Tears of Dawn, an imperial artifact that is with the leader, but the revolutionaries, as that should be enough to make the king leave him alone. Elrond says he understands and that now he just wants to ask him to consider leaving the next day, so he can bathe, eat, and receive medical treatment, realizing that all of this is thanks to Carls. Galosian simply accepts. Then we see everyone gathered around a campfire, smiling and chatting with each other. Bamidolo tells Fellet that he will serve him as if serving his own brother, leaving our boy very confused by that statement. The day quickly dawns, and next to the protagonist, Carls reveals that he's a bit nervous, just like Turving. Approaching, Elrond says everything is ready, then asks the boy to return safely so he can get to know him better, and also to take good care of Carls. Smiling, our boy says he will. Thus, everyone starts heading toward the portal that leads to Orax. On the other side of the portal, a great blue light shoots toward them, and someone announces that the third prince has arrived. Staring firmly at the boy, Bamilo welcomes him to Orax. Looking ahead, the trio of warriors seems completely shocked by the view, thinking our boy remembers the mission he received when he arrived in that world, which kind of showed that Galosian's survival and escape weren't in the game. But now he just received a guaranteed lottery ticket that even being grade D is a generous reward, even more for him who is at level 9. Then the protagonist concludes that when he reaches level 10, it will be time to buy the second cards, and even if it's a D grade one, it will be incredibly advantageous, since that type of card can be used to gain experience. Even so, our boy's biggest wish is that the Great Mage card appears once more, just one more time. Suddenly, a voice shouts ordering that all of them be arrested immediately. Carls gets worried, but the protagonist asks him to remember what he heard before leaving, about combat being prohibited since they won't be in Imperial territory, and if they make a mistake, there will be no nobles to save them. After all, they will be in Orax, the city of outlaws and those who cry for revolution. Sometime later, after walking, we see that Galosian is tired of being tied up. But even so, not resisting was a very conscious choice. Smiling, Bamilo asks if the boy really thought they fell for that silly trick about a prince being a messenger of Olam. Hearing that ends up irritating our boy who, being far from home, can't do anything. The man then says that just as he isn't a messenger of the god of vengeance, he also shouldn't try to fool the great archbishop. Furious, Turvan asks how Bamilo could do that to them. We're taken to another place, where someone flips through a book before closing it. We see that it's a woman with magenta eyes and glasses. Smiling, she welcomes Galosian, who is sitting right in front of her. Since he's still tied up, our boy says that's quite an aggressive welcome for someone who prevented members of the Order of Vengeance from dying. Smiling, the woman wonders if that's really how the boy wants to play, while the protagonist thinks that Bamilo is a very talented assassin who must have received reports about him through birds, which means the man had enough time to set a trap for him. We find out that the woman in front of the protagonist is the great archbishop of the Church of Olam, named Chandel Frey, who desires revenge against the Empire due to the incurable injuries on her arm. Thinking, our boy concludes that the woman wants to use him to cause some kind of damage to the Empire. Suddenly, Chandel Frey says that he's right, as if reading his thoughts, then stating that even without knowing his true intentions, nothing will change even if he confesses. Galosian then says that probably the minister in charge of palace affairs, who is their ally, is furious, something he would be too if he were about to be caught. Smiling, the woman says that's quite interesting. However, the protagonist says he's not interested since, thanks to her, he even had a duel against the Marquis, which caused a very good sensation, a feeling she must know well even if she didn't win like he did. After being shot down by the Archbishop's glare, our boy asks if she wants to kill him, and stating that if that happens, she'll bitterly regret it, since without him there's no way to prevent the catastrophe that will strike Orax in approximately 10 days counting from that day, where many lives will be sacrificed. Smiling, the woman asks what catastrophe he's talking about and if it's some kind of earthquake. After all, the city has a church where a god can manifest directly and stop anything with divine power. Giving a little laugh, Galosian asks if she doesn't know that divine power isn't omnipotent, as that's the natural and logical order. Placing her hand on the table, the archbishop says that indeed everything requires a natural and logical order, then orders them to take the third prince to the dungeon. As the woman walks away, the guards quickly enter to fulfill the order. Trembling all over, our boy says something there isn't right. Arriving in the cell, he meets Carls and Turvain, who ask if he's okay and how the conversation with Frey went. Galosian stops walking and gives a smile, before the iron door closes behind him. After a few minutes of exchanging glances, everyone sits down and the knight says that Bamilo visited them and brought food. The witch says the man also briefly commented on the city's situation. The protagonist asks if the priest mentioned the conflicts involving the factions, leaving the woman surprised. Carl says the man revealed that the Kishiras Cathedral and the Titan Task Force are keeping the Olam Church under control, stating that they need to expel or execute the third prince, who is considered an enemy. We discover that 6 military groups are part of the Revolutionary Army faction, the Great Undan Church of the Serpent's Tablet, where the group is now, the Kishiras Church of the Fox's Tablet, the border guard responsible for the outer areas, the city maintenance unit that guards the messenger's grounds, the ISD Army, which is the reserve force, and the Titan Task Force that is forming a large revolutionary force by dividing their roles in scale. However, the central figure of all this is the supreme ruler, who is equivalent to the emperor of the empire. In his thoughts, our boy concludes that everyone must have discussed how to deal with him and asks if Bamilo said anything else. Turvan then says that the man said there are many people as smart as the third prince, and that it was because he was too arrogant that he ended up thrown in that cell. Worried, the woman says that after that, she didn't know what else to say, not that she agreed with what the man said. Suddenly, our boy starts acting strangely and worries his allies. Galosian says he's fine and that actually he found it funny since he realized that Bamilo meant that inside there's a passage that leads to the underground. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.